Welcome to Mrs. True Crime. Today's video is an in-depth look into the massacre on the Mary Russell. It's a tale of jealousy and paranoia. If you are triggered by anything dealing with death or torture, feel free to click off this video. Perhaps check out my gaming channel, Retell Me Games, for some lighthearted content. If not, I'm Nicole. Let's get started. Birthed with a fair complexion and red hair, Captain William Stewart was sharp, intelligent, and described as a kind, good commander. Marrying a Papist named Betsy, together they had 5 children, all christened. Well respected in his community and profession, his command of the brig Mary Russell seemed to be just another boat on his resume. Mary Russell left Cork, Ireland for Barbados in early 1828 with a cargo of mules. Along with the shipment were 12 people: William Smith, the first mate; William Swanson, second mate; John Kramer, carpenter; John Howes, Francis Sullivan, and John Keating, all seamen; Timothy Connell, and James Murley, ostlers; 15-year-old senior apprentice John Deves; 12-year-old apprentice Henry Rickards, and 13-year-old apprentice Daniel Scully. 11-year-old Thomas Hammond was the only passenger not fitted for a job. He was the ill son of James Hammond, Stewart's close friend. The boat reached Barbados without issue and set to sail May 9, 1828, carrying hides, sugar, and 1 additional passenger. Captain James Rains was first mate on another vessel that docked in Barbados, but was abandoned from his position due to intemperance. Unlucky in seeking passage elsewhere, Stewart unhappily allowed Rains on board. For a week, the voyage was pleasant, but soon Stewart began to act disgruntled and cold. He declared to First Mate Smith that God warned him in a dream that his crew, led by Rains, would kill him and seize his ship. Smith tried to get the captain to see reason, but Stewart heard none of this. He remained on edge and observant of his unsuspecting crew. He took note of how often Rains socialized with others, speaking Gaelic, the language of Ireland, which Stewart didn't understand. When addressed, the crew denied any wrongdoing, but Stewart ignored them and threatened harm if they spoke Gaelic again. For his protection, Stewart ordered Swanson, Sullivan, and Connell to sleep in his cabin. He armed himself with a harpoon, an axe, a grains, and a crowbar. Smith's dismissal of Stewart's dreams caused the captain to lose confidence in his first mate, and he was ordered to sleep in the half deck. Stewart's paranoia grew as the days pressed on, and simple inquiries such as Howes, a seaman, asking for instructions on taking lunar observations clouded Stewart's judgment. Frustrated by what Stewart thought to be disobedient eyes, he threw instruments and charts overboard, saying that Rains had driven him to do so. As he threw over charts and logs, Stewart apparently said, "They are my own, and I can make more." Though, according to former explorer William Scoresby, Stewart kept a log glass and a spare line, the last leaf of a logbook, and a chart belonging to Rains. Lastly, Stewart boarded the Mary Harriet, a passing ship from New York heading to Liverpool to buy meat, and returned with a pair of pistols. By mid-June, Stewart had convinced himself that First Mate Smith was plotting to kill him. The captain ordered his men to tie Smith's hand behind his back, but Sullivan and Howes refused. Sullivan said if we lashed the mate without reason, he would take the law of us when we get home. To that, Howes added that he didn't see anything wrong with Smith. The 2 men then walked away. Knowing their insubordination, Stewart's anger grew. To appease their commander, Keating, Connell, and Swanson agreed to be bound. Smith, noticing the pistol Stewart now carried, also agreed to the bondage. Smith was led to the lazaret, a compartment beneath the cabin floor, where he rested for 3 days, only acquiring 1 meal each day. With the assistance of carpenter John Kramer, Stewart made a hole in the cabin deck so that Smith could breathe efficiently. It was here that Smith witnessed the massacre to come. Winning over their apprentices, Deves, Rickards, and Scully, they assisted in getting each man to the cabin and binding their hands and feet. Connell, Keating, Rains, Swanson, Kramer, and Sullivan were thrown down on mattresses or the cabin floor. Each man was warned with a pistol to the chest and demanded to confess or have their brains blown out. The only one to challenge the captain was Howes. Much like the others, he was persuaded to the cabin, but Stewart ambushed him on the stairs out of fear. After brief shock, Howes took off running, while Stewart followed, shooting though missing. Howes reached the forecastle, forward part of a ship with the sailors' living quarters, and jumped down the open hatchway, where he found Murley. Out of options, Stewart claimed he wouldn't harm Howes, and all he wanted was to sleep, and felt safer knowing everyone was tied up. Reluctantly, Howes allowed Murley to tie his hands behind his back and came forward. Murley was bound soon afterward. The young apprentices were now armed and made to guard the prisoners. After time, all but Howes were in the cabin after complaints of cold and discomfort from the sea air. Howes was moved to the half-deck open hatch, where he began to slowly loosen his restraints. In the cabin, Stewart wasn't satisfied with the bonds on the men and fixed bolts into the cabin floor, dividing each man with a rope noose attached to the nearest bolt. To paint a picture, the men's hands were tied behind their back, as their feet were tied firmly together with a noose around their necks, so that any free movement of the head equaled self-strangulation. While the men agonized, Howes, who'd loosened his restraints, challenged the captain, declaring, "But as I am the oldest of your crew, I shall be the least missed. Fire away. You're worse than a Turk or a Tartar or any other barbarian. You will yet meet a day of reckoning for this. Death is no terror to me, whatever it may be to others." Stewart shot Howes twice, a bullet landing in between Howes' thumb and the second grazing Howes' side, who fell on his back and played dead. Periodically, Stewart and their apprentices checked in on Howes until they noticed his hand had moved. Fearful, Stewart shot Howes' thigh, who cried out. Though the apprentices had weapons, Howes talked two of them out of harming him, while he charged Stewart and wrestled him to the ground. Apprentice Rickards hit Howes over the head with an axe. Howes, blinded by blood, managed to escape a worse fate. By now, the Mary Russell was flying a reverse ensign at half-mast, the recognized international distress signal, yet thus far no boat had stopped to assist. Upset by a number of things now, Stewart went into the cabin with a crowbar shouting, "The curse of God is upon you all," and viciously attacked all 7 men in the head. Each man, in order of attack, Swanson, Murley, Kramer, Sullivan, Keating, Connell, and Rains, witnessed the murder of the one before his own, as Stewart cried out, "Ye ruffians, you want to take my life, I have taken yours." Unsatisfied with the murders, he then grabbed an axe and repeated the cycle. A reporter from the Constitution of Cork Advisor described the scene as 7 human beings with their skulls so battered that scarcely a vestige of them was left for recognition, with a frightful mess of coagulated blood all strewn about the cabin. Stewart then tried to stab Smith through the air hole with the pointed end of the crowbar, but only hit his shirt and trouser leg. Annoyed, he then grabbed the harpoon, injuring Smith's left eye, shoulder, ear, and side. The harpoon struck a bundle of hides, which felt like a human body, and Stewart convinced himself that Smith was dead. He then drank and smoked a pipe over the dead bodies, raising his hand for the young apprentices to see, saying, "Look, boys, at my hand, how steady it is. I think no more of killing them than if they were dogs." That night, while the remaining slept, Smith and Howes escaped their confinements and found refuge in a hatch together. The following morning, June 25th, Stewart heard Captain Robert Callender's voice. Robert Callender of St. Andrews, New Brunswick, was a captain of American ship Mary Stubbs. Stewart showed Callender the cabin of bodies, exclaiming "Mutiny," and saying, "Am I not a valiant little fellow to kill so many men?" Together the two searched the rest of the ship for others, as the apprentices made way to the Mary Stubbs. The captains eventually found Howes and Smith, to Stewart's amazement. They were tied and led to the awaiting boat, while Stuart stayed behind with 2 members of the Stubbs on his boat. The longer he stayed with these men, Stuart's paranoia grew. Fearing the new members would seek revenge, he shouted, "Lord, help me," and jumped overboard. He was promptly rescued, only to jump off once again. Again, he was rescued and tied at the legs and transferred to the Stubbs. The next day, seeing Smith and Howes and feeling they seek vengeance, he jumped for a final time, being rescued by a passing fishing boat. An inquest, which took place in the presence of the dead, happened the following day. Still, they were uncertain of the events that took place. The next morning, the police in Skibbereen notified the coroner that they had Stuart in custody, and he'd confessed to the murder of 7 men. Stuart was charged with the capital charge of the murder of Captain James Gold Rains on August 11, 1828. Witnesses Smith, Howes, and Daniel Scully testified of the murders, that the crew made no attempt to mutiny. Evidence arose that Stuart engaged in previous strange behaviors. With testimony and evidence stacked against him, Stuart was found not guilty by reasons of mental derangement. Dr. Edward Townsend, local inspector of Gow County, said Stuart suffered from monomania, a condition defined as a man may be mad on one particular subject and quite rational and sane on all others. Hearing the verdict, Stuart threw himself on his knees, raising his hands to the heavens as if in prayer, and continued this position for about half a minute. Stuart was then committed to what is now the Central Mental Hospital, but Dr. Osborne transferred him to what is now the South Infirmary Victoria University Hospital. Stuart grew fond of Osborne, making him a present of a full-rigged model ship constructed to scale from bones. When Osborne died, Stuart had another psychotic episode and killed a hospital attendant. He was sent back to Central, where he died in 1873. Patrick Connell, brother to Timothy Connell, recorded a gravestone in Seal Murray Cemetery at Passage West that reads, "You, gentle reader that pass this way, attend a while, adhere to what I say. By murder vile I was bereft of life, and parted from 2 lovely babes and wife. By Captain Stuart I met an early doom, on board the Mary Russell, the 22nd June, forced from this world to meet my God on high, with whom I hope to resign eternally." Jealousy and obsession fueled Captain Stuart's mind, and he wanted to end something that hadn't even begun. Despite the bondage, the threats, and the bullets, no man upon the Mary Russell ever tried mutiny. In Stuart's state of madness, his crew were faithful to the last breath. I'm Mrs. True Crime, and remember to be kind, be loud, be aware. For more information about the Mary Russell, why not check out some of these awesome links? And if you like what you saw and heard today, why not drop a like and a comment? Maybe subscribe while you're here? I make new videos every Tuesday and Friday, and you don't want to miss what's in store.